This is the 11th lecture in Intro to Mobile Programming. We're going to talk about storyboarding and user interface components in this lecture. We'll start with some user interface components, and then we'll take a look at a fun example of storyboarding. Okay, user interface components. These are probably things, there are a lot of user interface components that we're used to because we see them in other places. For traditional data entry, we have things like label, text box, and password box. So again, you think of a lot of these examples on the web. I'll go to the Plant Places web search screen. So a label is something like this, where the user cannot change it. It's easy to style, and we can even put events like click events to it, but it's very intuitive to the user that these labels cannot be changed or edited by the user. Okay? A text box is something where the user can enter some data. So for Genius, I could put something like CERCIS. Okay, I can type that in. And we see that this is also an autocomplete text box, which means that as we start typing, it starts finding matches for the letters that we've typed. So you see, each of these genus here contain the letter CER, which is letters that we have typed. So autocomplete is something we didn't initially have on the World Wide Web in HTML, not very easily, but with a plugin called jQuery, it makes it very easy and very possible to do this. And that's very helpful in a case of something like this where we have Latin names where it's easy to forget, like Cercidophyllum. That's an easy one to forget how to spell. So we have text boxes like that, and then we have labels. One that I don't have represented here is the password. But with the password, essentially well, I actually do have a password. One second. If I go to articles and then scroll to the bottom, and then you see there's a password required section, I can click on administration and put in, this is a pop-up here. Actually, I think I used I forget what I used for this. And you see when I type in my password, it will put in asterisks. Okay, Brandon Jones it was. Brandon Jones. You see as I type in my password, it fills them in with asterisks, similar to what you would see on Blackboard. So here we go. We're now in a password protected section of the application. So several different UI components that we'll see in many places in normal software like a browser-based app or a fat client app, as we would call it. We'll also see these in mobile. In mobile, there's a much stronger emphasis on autocomplete. So this concept where, say, even I can go to the home page here and I can type in Cercis like so, and then you see the autocomplete comes up. In mobile, there's a much higher emphasis on autocomplete because we are not dealing with a full-size keyboard. And many times a user using a mobile device is doing other things at the same time. So we want to help that user along. Part of it is also we've honestly just gotten more advanced technologically. We've gotten better at doing things like autocomplete. So those are things that we'll traditionally see. Okay. Now, for choices, there are several options that we have if we want to allow the user to make a choice. And we'll see this on the search screen as well. If we have data where the user can pick one or the other, and usually picks at least one, we'll use a radio button. This goes back to the old days in automobiles when you would push a radio button as a preset for a radio station on your car. And it's funny because that was back when back when we had manual dials on radios. They weren't digital or anything like that. So you would try to tune it with the dial, and then when you found it, you would set it to memory. So radio buttons like this, you can only listen to one radio station at a time. So you see, we can only, when we click one, the other one becomes unclicked. Okay. Another selection we'll have is multiple selection, where you can click 0 to many, which is a checkbox. So you see it has the little squared off side instead of a rounded side. Native and editable, that's a common search term. So checkboxes are good if you want to show the user all of the options available at a certain time, And you want to let the user choose either 0 or 1 or multiple or all. Leave that up to the user. So the user can choose many there. The other kind of selection we'll have, the user can choose only one, which is a drop down. Drop downs are similar to radio buttons in that the user can choose only one, but they're good for saving space if you have a lot of options. So you see here we have search by color, and you see that the drop down items are colored here to indicate the colors. Now, another good use of drop downs is when the data are variable. So sometimes you might have two things in the drop down, other times you might have 100. Okay, with checkboxes, it would be hard to negotiate for that. It would be hard to tell the checkbox, make enough space to either show 2 or show 100. With radio buttons, showing 2 is much different than showing 100. But with the traditional drop down, you see, this list can grow and it doesn't change the amount of space that it takes up on the user interface. Okay, the list can grow, it doesn't change the amount of space that it takes up on the user interface. As a matter of fact, this list we're looking at here is live. As I add more options to the color dropdown here, this list will grow. One interesting thing is I said the user can't change a label. Here's a case where, take a look at that label right now. It's kind of a yellowish color. Here's a case where I used that label. I did change the background to give the user some feedback. So you see, if I choose one of these kind of mauve colors up here, as soon as I select it, the background of this label also changes to match. So that's something where you can program against a label, but the user can't go in and manually change the text. So in this case, I wanted to give some feedback on the color that the user selected. I just put together a little bit of JavaScript to make that happen, and that's what we ended up with. So multiple selection, checkboxes, radio buttons, and drop downs. We'll see that we have, the navigation in a mobile app is a bit different than it would be on a full web page like this. So we'll see when we get to mobile, we have several other options as well. Okay, traditional action components, things that will do some kind of action. Button will on the web, a button usually indicates that we're submitting some kind of data like search. Let me uncheck some of these. So I'll click search. That indicates that we are submitting some type of data and we expect some kind of response. And then a hyperlink indicates navigation. Of course, it's not a big surprise here. The ads that come up are ads that want us to click and want us to know it's going to navigate. And it's funny, I was just, I'm sure you've seen this as well. You search for something, you don't make a purchase, then you start seeing ads for this. This is a hotel where I typically stay in when I'm going to London, when I'm going to England. And I looked and the price went up a little bit. I used to be able to get it cheaper. So I went to another hotel, booked that, but needless to say, now they're reminding me that I can book this very hotel again. So underline will tip, and again, we see the ad on the left here. Here's an ad as well. You see we mouse over. Underline typically indicates navigation. That goes back to the history of the World Wide Web, pretty much. An underline link indicated navigation. We remember that initially the World Wide Web wasn't things like Facebook. Initially it was a lot of text and very minimal styling. It looked like a Word document. So picture that, a lot of text, not a lot of photos, because frankly, the speed wasn't there to handle it. Speed wasn't there to handle the photos. So we had a lot more text. And the easy way to say, hey, I'm a link, is to just make underlines be links. Now, as we got a little better at design, we started doing the hovers like this, where you see when I put my mouse over the link, the underline temporarily goes away, and also the text turns black. So that's something that came to us through CSS styling, where we could give a bit of a better appearance to show, hey, here's where your mouse is, and if you click right now, here's where you're going to go. So you see we have a hover, and then many times as we click a link, it will change color to let us know that we have clicked that link. Oh, you know what? I have a good. Okay. I talk about the old web. There is one website that is infamous for being very old school. I know it's hard to picture what I mean by old web. You know, if you grew up with the web, if you grew up with Facebook, it's hard to imagine what the web used to look like. When I was in undergrad, when I was in grade school, even people used to tell me about computers that were the size of this room, and that was always the case. No matter what room you were in, the computer was always the size of this room, and that was kind of hard for me to imagine. Luckily, there are some websites like this one. This is what a typical 90s website looked like. You see, not a lot of text. We have links here that are underlined, very traditional links. Okay, we click, and it's very much plain text, not a whole lot of navigation. Okay, that's how the web, this is what the web really looked like years ago. Okay, so buttons indicate we're submitting data. Links with an underline or maybe even a hover option indicate that we're navigating somewhere. Menu came in within the last I'd say about 7 years this became more popular. So if we take a look here, our menu indicates that we have a drop down and options. And again, this is from a bit of HTML, JavaScript, and cascading style sheets, and also some libraries that we have that we're able to use. So menu is something where we have a drop down. Now, once again, we would have this kind of navigation on a traditional website, but probably not this verbose on a mobile app. In other words, there's a lot of duplication here. We have, there are many different ways you can see evergreen plants. You can go to shrubs evergreen, you could go to search plants, and under category, you could choose evergreen shrub. Okay, so there are many different ways to see the same things on a website. Well, on a mobile app, we're kind of going to try to cut down on redundancy just to simplify the interface a little bit. Okay. Um, and then with mobile, we have that was actually a slider, is kind of like a toggle on and off. We see a more rich user interface experience on mobile because it's not limited by HTML. We have a lot more programming we can do, a lot more real time programming we can do. HTML, the web, that model is based on you fill in a whole bunch of data and then you submit it to a website and then you get back a whole bunch of data. Only recently have we really got into dynamic things where we can start typing and we get an instant response. That's very new in the web. We get spoiled with Facebook because we see that kind of stuff a lot. But the idea that you can start typing and get some instant feedback on the web is a relatively new concept. Where on mobile, it is very possible to have instant feedback on certain things, especially if you have mobile data. I'm sorry, local data. So there are some new things given that we have a more real-time interaction with the user on mobile. There are some new things that we have on mobile. Gesture and touch is probably the newest. So if you have a mobile phone, a lot of times you can pull down on something like Facebook for it to update, or you can pull down on a lot of apps you can pull down to get more news, like a Twitter feed or something like that. You can pull down. What's nice is that you're not actually pushing a button or a UI component. And what does that mean? That means there's less need for controls on the physical screen you're looking at, because to pull something down, you're not actually hitting a button. But by using these touch activities, you're interacting with the application. Since you don't need a button, that's all that much more very valuable real estate that is freed up for the application. So traditionally, we'd make it very screaming obvious that, hey, click here on a website. Or on a mobile app, we want to deal with things that the user has learned, like pull down to update. Other ones, swipe to navigate. That's one that we're seeing more of now. So a lot of times, if you want to go backwards and forwards in an app, you just swipe it back and forth. One of the ones that Apple recommends is if you want to erase data, you just shake the phone. If you want to maybe go back or reset, you shake. Obviously, these are things that wouldn't work well in another hardware profile, like like a laptop or a desktop computer, something like that. You couldn't physically move the device. But that is something that we can do with mobile. And again, that's less buttons, less controls we have to have on the screen, which really cleans up and neatens up that user interface quite a bit. And then, of course, pinch to expand and collapse. You see this a lot with photos where you can, pinch or reverse pinch. I don't know what you would call that, but you can kind of reverse pinch to expand or collapse things. And that allows us to directly interact with the object, which we know that follows one of our big UI theories, allow the user to directly interact with the object. Okay. We also have the accordion view. Now this is going to take us into our next example, which is going to be the where we are storyboarding. I'm going to go ahead and click on Advanced Plant Search, and we'll see a little bit of that here. That'll take a moment to load. So while that's loading, I'm going to go back to Plant Places, the full website. We're going to click on sustainability. One second. We go to articles and sustainability. Okay. An accordion is this idea where you have different things by categories, and you see I can click on medium trees, and then that's going to expand and the rest of the page will collapse. So before it was showing large trees, now it's showing medium trees. I can go down below, I can click medium shrubs, and we see that will expand and the others will collapse. Small shrubs, that will expand and the others will collapse. And then ground covers and vines. So you see what the accordion does, it allows us to take a whole lot of data on one page and present it in a way to the user that's very easy for the user to use, very easy for the user to pick something like, medium trees and then only see medium trees. Without the accordion, what we get without the accordion is we get a whole lot of data on a page, and if I'm just looking for small trees or if I'm just looking for ground covers, I have to scroll way, way, way down to find it. But with the accordion, it's a lot easier to quickly navigate to that part of the page. Again, on a web page, this is something relatively new. We didn't really have accordions recently, until just recently. But this is something that's possible through jQuery. I've put a lot of thought into other places that I can use accordions. One trick is on the full website, if we go to something like Eastern Redbud, this page gets very large and has a lot of data. It requires a lot of scrolling. This is a good page where probably I could make a better use of accordions and have maybe different pictures under accordions, the GPS under accordions, the map under accordions, things like that. So lots of opportunity here. The nice thing is in mobile, this is something that we have a bigger experience with. This is something that accordions are something that we can use more natively. So, okay, there we go. List view is another one where in the web we would many times have a results page like we just saw. Okay, we'd have results. A list view is like the one we saw when we did search by color, and it gives us a list of plants that match. Or if I come down here, here's the Plant Places mobile search, and you see I really wanted to put a lot of details on this, but I knew I had limited screen real estate. So what I did is things like features. You see I can click on that, and then just like an accordion, and it's a little bit hard to show on this screen, but just like an accordion, the features recommended native and edible appear. On the other hand, I can click that and collapse it again, and then we're back to a more simplified search screen. I also wanted to show what I thought was the most important and have that expanded by default. So bloom date, we can click to collapse that if we want. And then we can click to expand features, and that will give us our recommended native and edible. Okay, so here if I type in Cercis, okay, and I hit search, this is going to take us to a list view, which is similar to a result, kind of like our results page here on the web, but it's very consolidated. It just shows us plants that match this. Here we go. This is hitting live data as well. It's just going to show us plants that match our search terms. So here we go with Cercis canadensis. And then we don't need an underline here because we can kind of intuitively grasp that if we click on one, it's going to take us to the next screen. This is a good application where we could do even like a swipe left. If I were on this web result here, and I don't have it set up to do this now, but this would be a good concept. If the user swipes left to right, it would take you back in history. So maybe that's a good option for the next version of Plain Places. And anyway, it's rendering now. It's going to take a moment there and render our screen. Okay, so a few things that are new for mobile. Notification in mobile, and I think my notification just went away. What we'll do is we'll have a confirmation or a toast as a pop-up. A confirmation many times requires that a user actually clicks on a button to dismiss the application, where a toast will pop up and then go away without user interaction. Remember, enchant, amaze, simplify are the three principles that we want to use. So simplify means don't make the user continuously click OK on something. Instead, inform the user. After you've given the user a moment to read and digest, automatically take the notification away. So that's a big difference between mobile and web. In the web, many times, or in a traditional program, you would put up a dialog box with a yes, no, cancel. On mobile, usually, you'll put up a notification, and after a certain time, you'll just automatically dismiss that notification. Okay. Now we know also in Android we have notifications bar on the top where you'll see all of your notifications like new email, new calendar appointment, something like that, or a new update. They will all appear here across the top, and then you can swipe down to see what the notification is. That's one I've gotten to like a lot recently. So if I get a new email, if it's a work email or a personal email, it'll show up at the top. I can swipe down and it shows me a quick summary of the email, and I'll know then if it's something I need to address immediately or if I can wait. I use that quite a bit. I know that's quite handy. So the notification bar goes across the top. One little difference in Android version 2 to 4 is that in earlier versions, and this took me a bit of getting used to, and let me see if I can get this up high enough, and I'm going to need to move down the recording. Okay, I don't know what Screencast-O-Matic is capturing now, but if you can see down here, we have a back button, a home, and a menu. These things are kind of going away in Android. And in Apple, we know, they only have one button down there, but in Android, they're using more of this action bar navigation here, where you can click here and then see a drop down of menu options. So this is our application name, our logo, and then a drop down of all the navigation options, where previously we would click a button on the physical hardware. In newer versions of Android 4 and greater, that concept is kind of getting minimized. In place of it is this little guy here that acts like a drop down menu. One thing about Android as well is that they really don't encourage you to have more than 6 menu items. And you see here I have 6. I wouldn't go any more than this. When you get more, then it's too much for the user. It's just it's cumbersome. It's too wordy. So even as I look at this, probably I should really take preferences off. In a future version of Plain Places Mobile, I might eliminate that entirely. That's generally something that is not recommended. We want to minimize that, at least not make it come out and jump out at the user. So those are some of our fundamental UI components. I'm going to go ahead and stop this recording now. And in the next one, we're going to talk about how to use some of these components and do some storyboarding, which is really fun. So I will see you then. Thank you.